Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a really comprehensive guide today on something called exam access arrangements.
Yeah, it's a great topic.
It really is. So whether you are a student, maybe a parent, an educator, or, honestly, just someone fascinated by how systems can be designed for actual fairness, you are definitely in the right place. Our mission today is to look at how educational barriers are systematically dismantled so that a test actually measures what it claims to measure.
Exactly, and it is a fascinating framework, really. The source text we're analyzing lays out this golden rule right from the jump, and it anchors everything we're going to talk about today.
Right.
It explicitly states that exam access arrangements help remove barriers so students can show what they know.
Yeah.
They do not change the exam, and they definitely do not give an unfair advantage.
To put that in perspective for you listening, just imagine you are lining up for like the most important sprint of your life.
Yeah.
The crowd is watching, the starting gun is raised, and you are totally prepared.
You're ready to go?
Right. Your muscles are ready, you know the track, you've put in all the hours. But there is one massive problem. The officials have forced you to wear shoes that are like 3 sizes too small.
Ouch. Yeah, that wouldn't work.
No, you wouldn't even be able to run, let alone show them how fast you actually are.
And if someone suddenly walked up and, handed you a pair of shoes that actually fit, no one in the stands would yell that you had an unfair advantage. They would just be relieved that you could finally run the race.
Exactly.
The student still has to do the running, or in the case of an exam, the thinking.
Yeah, the exam isn't getting easier. If it's a history exam, they still need to know the dates, the causes, the historical impacts. If it's math, they have to know the formulas. The arrangements simply provide the support needed to let that knowledge out. It's about, leveling the playing field, not lowering the hoop.
That distinction is so critical. We're talking about stripping away friction.
Mm-hmm.
And the guide breaks this friction down into several categories, addressing different phases of the cognitive journey a student goes through during a test.
Okay, so let's follow that journey. Before we even get to how a student reads a question or writes an answer, we really have to look at the physical environment itself, right? The time constraints and the space.
Absolutely.
Let's start with time, because the most common accommodation we see here is extra time. According to our guide, this is usually a 25% extension on the standard exam time. But what stands out isn't just the extra minutes, it's the strategy that guide provides for how to actually use them.
Yeah, the advice is heavily focused on pacing. It tells students to plan their time, work at their own pace, check their work, and above all, don't rush. This gets into the cognitive load theory behind exams.
Oh, interesting.
Right, because for a student with a processing speed deficit, standard time limits don't actually test their knowledge of biology. They test how fast their brain can process incoming data.
Which is an entirely different metric. So, providing that 25% extra time is essentially giving their working memory a chance to catch up. It alleviates that panic that, just freezes the brain. But there is a distinct difference between extending the clock and another time-based arrangement in the guide, which is supervised rest breaks.
Yes, very different. With extra time, the clock is still ticking, just for a longer duration.
Hmm.
But with supervised rest breaks, the exam clock actually stops.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a student who might experience severe fatigue, maybe medical issues or extreme anxiety, this is a very different mechanism. The step-by-step process is pretty clear. The student raises their hand, tells the invigilator they need a rest break, and time just stops.
So they can just take a breather.
Right. They stay quietly in their seat, or they can take an agreed-upon movement break. When they're ready to continue, they raise their hand again, and the clock resumes.
That completely shifts the dynamic. Instead of just trying to outrun the clock, they're allowed to literally step off the track for a moment.
Hmm.
If you think about the physiological response to a ticking clock, the elevated heart rate, the shallow breathing, what we often call an amygdala hijack during a panic attack, stopping the clock, provides this huge psychological safety net. Just knowing they have the power to hit pause might actually prevent the panic attack entirely.
It really does. And beyond time, we also have to consider the physical space. The guide mentions the separate room arrangement, which just means taking the exam in a quiet space away from other students.
Put yourself in a standard exam hall for a second just to visualize this. Think about hundreds of students, chairs squeaking, people coughing, invigilators pacing up and down the aisles.
It's a lot.
It is. If you are a student with sensory processing issues or severe ADHD, that room isn't just distracting, it's an active barrier to your cognition. Your brain is literally trying to process the squeaking chair with the exact same intensity as the essay question in front of you.
And the separate room maintains focus by stripping away that environmental noise. The student goes to a quiet room, listens to the instructions, and follows all the same exam rules, but in an environment where their brain can actually function at its baseline.
Okay, I do want to push back on one of the arrangements in this section, though.
Sure.
The guide mentions something called a prompter. And, I mean, if I'm taking a test and an adult is standing next to me prompting me, that sounds a bit like a cheat code. How is that not just giving away the answers?
It does sound like a loophole at first glance, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But a prompter is not a tutor. They aren't whispering historical facts into the student's ear.
Okay, so what are they doing?
Well, the guide explicitly states that the student and the prompter agree on quiet signals beforehand. So a tap on the desk, a hand gesture, maybe just pointing at the clock.
Ah, so it's purely nonverbal cues.
Primarily, yes. The prompter's sole job is to help the student stay on task and manage their time. They provide a quiet prompt to help the student refocus on their work or just remind them to check the clock. The student remains entirely in control of their own answers.
You know, that makes a lot of sense when you think about the meta concept of what an exam actually tests. Traditionally, tests measure two things simultaneously, right? Your subject knowledge and your executive functioning.
Exactly.
Your ability to manage time, sustain attention, and organize your thoughts. For a student with atypical frontal lobe development, testing their executive function kind of obscures their actual history knowledge. So the prompter is just outsourcing the executive functioning so the cognitive energy can go toward the actual subject matter.
That's a perfect way to put it. So once the physical environment and the time limits are optimized, once the room is quiet and the panic is managed, we hit the next immediate barrier, getting the question off the page and into the brain.
The input gap.
Yes. If decoding text is the specific barrier, we have to bypass the eyes. The guide details 4 main reading supports to bridge this gap, ranging from human interaction to, well, technological solutions.
Let's run through those. What's the first one?
The first is a human reader. This is a trained adult who literally reads the exam questions and any permitted information allowed to the student.
Okay.
And the student has to direct them. They ask the reader to read the question, they listen carefully, and they can ask for it to be repeated as many times as needed. Or they can ask for specific permitted words to be read again. But crucially, the student still answers the question in their own way.
And then we have the technological options, right? Like the computer reader, where a computer reads the text on the screen aloud, allowing the student to adjust the speed, pause, or skip around.
Right. And there's also the reading pen.
I found this one really cool.
It is. It's a handheld device. The student switches it on, places it at the start of the text, presses play, and it scans and reads the text aloud through headphones as they just move it along the page.
That's amazing.
But we also shouldn't forget the simplest accommodation in this category, which is just reading aloud.
Oh, right.
The student is simply allowed to read the exam questions and information aloud to themselves. Just the physical act of speaking and hearing their own voice can aid comprehension immensely, completely bypassing that internal decoding struggle.
Looking at these options, it really raises an interesting dynamic. If a student has the option of a real live human being reading to them, why would a teenager choose a reading pen or a computer reader instead? The guide hints at this, and it really seems to come down to autonomy and the emotional experience of the exam.
It definitely does. Think about the social friction involved in having a human reader. If a student hasn't quite grasped a complex multi-part question, having to ask an adult to read the same paragraph for the 4th or 5th time, it can feel really embarrassing. It creates anxiety.
Yeah, they might feel like they're being annoying or that the adult is secretly judging them for not getting it quickly enough.
Exactly. But a computer doesn't judge. A reading pen doesn't sigh or check its watch. Using technology allows the student to completely control the pace and the repetition without any of that social friction. I mean, they can listen to a single sentence 10 times in a row, if that's what it takes for them to process it, and they maintain their dignity and focus while doing it.
It's not just about the text being read, it's about preserving the student's emotional bandwidth. So we've successfully bridged the input gap. The student understands the question, but understanding the question is really only half the battle. If a student knows the answer, the brilliance is totally locked inside their head, but they struggle to physically write it down, how do they get the knowledge out?
This brings us to the output gap, the writing and physical accommodations. And just like with reading, the guide offers a whole spectrum of solutions to decouple the physical act of writing from the intellectual act of answering.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that decoupling, because this is where working memory comes back into play again. Think about your own brain like a computer's RAM. If a student has motor dysgraphia, for instance, the physical act of holding a pen, forming the letters, and spelling the words that takes up almost all of their available RAM, there is very little processing power left to actually formulate a complex argument about the Industrial Revolution.
That's a great analogy. And the first solution the guide presents to free up that RAM is a scribe.
Right.
This is a trained adult who writes down the student's answers for them. The student dictates what they want to say, speaking clearly and at their own pace. And there's a vital step here. The student must listen back and check for accuracy, making any changes they need. As the guide points out, it's the student's ideas, but the scribe's writing.
Because if the scribe misspells a technical term or maybe misunderstands a sentence, it's still the student's grade on the line. The student is entirely responsible for the content, the punctuation, the structure, all of it.
Exactly. And there are also technological alternatives for getting the answers out, like the word processor. That allows students to type answers instead of writing by hand.
Which is so much faster for a lot of kids.
Oh, absolutely. The guide mentions the importance of typing in your own words, checking and editing, and saving your work regularly, of course. But they can only use permitted tools, meaning no spell check or grammar check, if the exam is specifically testing spelling and grammar.
That makes sense. And then speech recognition technology takes it even a step further. You just speak into a microphone and your words appear as text on the screen. Again, the burden is totally on the student to watch the words appear, check for mistakes, edit, and improve their work. The friction of the physical pen is gone, but the intellectual rigor completely remains.
Yes, and we also see this philosophy with the bilingual dictionary.
Oh, yeah. I found this one fascinating because you immediately wonder, how does a dictionary not give an unfair advantage in something like a geography or science exam? But looking at the strict boundaries around how it's used, it actually makes perfect sense.
It does.
The text specifies you use it only for translating specific words between two languages. You cannot translate the whole question, and you must answer in the required language.
Right, so it acts as a bridge for vocabulary, not a crutch for comprehension. It's for the student who understands the complex geographical concept perfectly in their first language, but simply needs to know the specific English word for, like erosion. It removes a language barrier so the geography knowledge can be assessed.
That brings us to maybe the most unique arrangement on the list, which is the practical assistant. The guide describes this as a trained adult who helps with practical tasks that a student cannot physically do themselves, like cutting, sticking, measuring, or maybe setting up equipment.
Yeah, and it can be hard to visualize how this works without crossing the line into just doing the work for the student.
Right. A great way to think about it is comparing the setup to a lead surgeon and a scrub nurse in an operating room.
Oh, I like that.
The practical assistant is the scrub nurse. They might physically hand over the scalpel, hold the clamp in place, or maybe in a science exam, pour the chemical into the beaker. But the student is the surgeon. They make the call. They do all the critical thinking, directing the assistant on exactly what to do step by step, and then they evaluate the result of the work. The text says it explicitly, the student does all the thinking.
The physical limitation is bypassed entirely, so the intellectual capacity can be accurately measured.
So we have this incredible toolkit available: time extensions, separate rooms, reading pens, scribes, practical assistants. It sounds highly effective. But a listener might be wondering, could a student just walk into school on the morning of their final exam, realize they're feeling incredibly anxious or overwhelmed, and ask for a reading pen or a separate room for the day?
The short answer is absolutely not.
Yeah, I figured.
And this is where the system ensures fairness, integrity, and actual effectiveness. The guide has a section titled, in all caps, "Use it or lose it."
They do not mince words there.
No, they don't. The most critical rule in this entire framework is that an access arrangement must be part of the student's normal way of working. You literally cannot parachute these tools in on exam day.
Right.
They have to be used regularly in lessons where appropriate, in class assessments, and in mock exams. If a student doesn't use the support regularly, the guide warns that they might actually lose the right to use it in the final exam.
From a practical standpoint, this is really about exam readiness. Imagine trying to use speech recognition technology for the very first time during the most important test of your life.
It would be a nightmare. You would spend all your cognitive energy trying to figure out the software. You'd be stressing over voice commands, wondering why it typed whale instead of well, and just losing precious time.
Exactly.
Instead of focusing on the difficult history question, you're basically battling a new piece of technology.
You'd be introducing a brand new barrier while trying to remove an old one. Practicing with a reading pen or a scribe is a distinct skill in itself. It takes time to build those neural pathways so that using the accommodation just becomes second nature.
That preparation is just as important as the accommodation itself. And that's why the guide provides a detailed before-the-exam checklist to help students build that fluency.
Let's explore that checklist, because it's a brilliant mental model for preparedness in general, whether you are taking an exam or maybe prepping for a major presentation at work. It breaks down into 5 straightforward steps. First, you have to know which arrangements you actually have.
Essential step 1.
Right. Second, you have to know how to use them technically. Third, you must have practiced using them in real conditions. Fourth, you need to know the specific exam rules associated with your tool. And fifth, you are ready and confident.
It creates this great chain of accountability. Exam readiness isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about mastering your environment and your tools. And if there is a break in that chain, like if the student is unsure about their arrangement or feels they need more practice, the guide provides a clear chain of command.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they aren't expected to just figure it out alone. They are explicitly instructed to talk to their teacher, their form tutor, their SEND team, or the exams office.
So there is a whole ecosystem of adults tasked with ensuring the metaphorical shoes actually fit.
Yes, exactly.
But that ecosystem relies really heavily on communication. The student has to advocate for themselves, but they do so within a highly structured framework designed to support them and actually validate their needs.
When we step back and look at this comprehensive guide, we see a beautifully designed system for equity. The extra time, the scribes, the reading pens, the rest breaks, they all serve the ultimate goal of empowerment.
It really boils down to a meta concept that is really the hidden takeaway of this entire deep dive. Traditionally, exams have tested compliance, executive function, and physical endurance just as much as they have tested actual knowledge. This framework is about stripping away the executive function tests and the physical barriers so the core knowledge can actually shine. It ensures that a student's true intellect is what is actually being tested and celebrated.
Absolutely.
The text closes with a brilliant summary of this. Your support, your ideas, your success.
It's powerful. But, this raises a broader concept, and it's something I want to leave you, our listener, to ponder today.
Okay.
We put incredible effort, as we've just seen, into designing these highly structured, barrier-free environments for students. We diagnose the friction points, whether they are visual, physical, or temporal, and we deploy targeted practice support so individuals can prove their capabilities.
We spend years teaching them how to use these tools effectively.
But why does this individualized mindset so often disappear once we enter the adult workforce? For those of you listening who manage teams, or even just manage your own workflow, think about your office or your work environment. What hidden barriers are we failing to remove in our own workplaces simply because they aren't explicitly labeled as exams?
Wow. Yeah, we often expect adults to just power through the poorly fitting shoes, assuming that struggling with the environment is just part of the job rather than removing the friction so they can actually do the job.
It's definitely something to evaluate in our own daily routines.
Truly. Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us, for listening, and for unpacking the mechanics of fairness with us. Until next time, keep questioning the barriers around you, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.